A key player in conception or infertility, in addition to the eggs, to the sperm, to the tubes, is the lining, which unfortunately sometimes we keep on forgetting, is that it's not only creating a good embryo in the lab or a couple timing intercourse at the right time, because at the end of the day, the uterus or the endometrium, which is the lining of the uterus, it's the place where the embryo, later on the fetus, and then the baby are going to stay for 9 months. And the thickening of the uterus or the lining of the womb, which is the endometrium, is a very key factor in that dictates the chances of pregnancy, whether naturally or whether after fertility treatment. We measure the lining in millimeters. And I always, when I mention the lining, there are two, if not three key things about the lining. The third one is a recent advance in investigating the lining that I will touch upon at the end of my answer. The first thing is checking the thickening. So when I mention a lining, I mention the thickening. And the good thickness of the lining is approximately at least around 7 to 8 millimeter around the time of ovulation. Because again, similar to anything in the field of fertility, what is the thickening means, I have to always couple it with what day of the cycle. And a good thickness of 7 to 8 millimeter around ovulation is considered to be fine. A little bit thicker is better. Too thick is too bad. Too thin is too bad. A lining that is too thick might also prevent embryos from implanting, because it might be speaking about a problem in the lining like a polyp or some abnormal cells in the lining like hyperplasia. Too thin of a lining is too bad. It might speak either of a lining that is not stimulated properly by hormones, or it might be speaking about scarring tissue inside the lining. Both of those will affect embryos to implant, whether naturally or whether after fertility treatment. We mentioned about thickness of the lining, but when we mention lining, we also mention the quality of the lining. And whether the thickness or the lining, this can be checked by doing an ultrasound scan, which is mainly an internal scan. The scan can be done through the tummy or an abdominal scan, but the vaginal scans are more accurate in assessing the lining. And your doctor will be measuring the thickness of the lining on a particular day. And we also not only check the thickness of the lining, we check the quality of the lining. And if you are reading a report about the lining, the letters A and B follow a number. So you'll discover that the report mentions 7B, 7A, or 7A/B. B is considered a good quality lining. So a good lining is a 7B or a trilaminar lining, while other linings like A or AB are in general associated with a poorer outcome because not a good quality. One last thing I want to mention about the lining is that these days, even if the lining looks perfect, a more growing field of research is are we targeting the implantation window in the lining correctly? And that's why these days there are some genetic testing that are done to the lining on the specific day when we put back embryos. Those studies are very promising. Those studies will help us in tailoring when is the best time to put back an embryo inside the lining, when the lining is ready to accept that embryo.